One might think with all the horrors and tragedies in the world, tarnished relationships, ill family members, and so many more sources of heartbreak involving living things, that humans would have little empathy left in their hearts for things that are not living or inanimate. But as it turns out, this is not necessarily the case. In fact, many studies have shown humans indeed share great empathy for inanimate things, whether it be cherished objects, historic landmarks, homes, cars, or as of late increasingly lifelike robots and AI. In this video, we'll discuss why it is that many people have this seemingly irrational empathy, what makes something truly living and deserving of more empathy than something else, and how the lines of these questions are starting to become blurred as technology advances. As a young child, you might have had that one special friend, be it a teddy bear, a doll, or an action figure, that even though you might have known deep down was not a real living thing, shared laughs with, amazing adventures, and perhaps even your darkest secrets. As you've gotten older though, this pretend friend often finds itself forgotten in some deep closet and merely lives as a fond memory of your childhood innocence, as the real world consumes all of your time. But upon occasion, a situation arises, such as a cherished object breaking, your longtime favorite restaurant closing, or the emotional decision to finally sell your old car, and you feel the same sort of empathy towards these inanimate things as you perhaps did towards your teddy bear, triggering a neurological pathway deep in the brain, still there from your childhood towards these non-living friends. A common term for this concept is anthropomorphism, defined as the attribution of human characteristics or behavior to an object, and has a long history of human adoption. Since the Paleolithic era, anthropomorphic behavior has been in practice, such as with Venus figurines, which might have been worshipped as a symbol of Mother Earth and were believed to bring fertility. Across Neolithic Europe, massive stone structures such as Stonehenge in England were likely built to honor spirits of the land, ancestors, or celestial forces in their local mythology. The stones were arranged with ritual precision, suggesting they might have been considered alive or spirit-charged. Indeed, attribution of soul to seemingly non-living things goes hand in hand with religion and spirituality, and throughout history, anthropomorphic behavior has often been strongest in these domains. For example, in ancient Egypt, statues of gods weren't just artistic representations, they were literally believed to be inhabited by the deity. Special rituals called the opening of the mouth were held, where statues were fed, clothed, and cared for. In addition, amulets, scarabs, and everyday objects would often carry spiritual protection. In Sumerian belief, life began when gods shaped humans from clay, suggesting the idea that objects can be brought to life by divine power, or perhaps in a literal sense, a person's imagination. Aspects of nature would also often be personified. For example, the indigenous American Navajo tribe regard 4 sacred mountains in their traditional homeland as beings each with their own personality and spiritual presence. During classical antiquity, Greek and Roman girls often played with jointed dolls made of terracotta or bone. The dolls often had movable limbs, detailed features, miniature wardrobes mimicking adult life, and were used for both imaginative play and ceremonial rites of passage. Before marriage, girls would dedicate their childhood dolls to a goddess like Artemis or Venus, symbolizing the transition to adulthood. Anthropomorphism showed up in classical storytelling as well, with the myth of Pygmalion, who fell in love with an ivory statue that came to life. Indeed, the attribution of life or a soul to something is often what makes us give that thing empathy. But what exactly is a soul, and who or what exactly has one? The ancient Greek philosophers would dive into this subject. For instance, Thales and Maitis believed everything including objects contained soul, saying, quote, "Everything is full of gods," and that water was the fundamental substance of all life. Plato would expand on this idea in his dialogue Timaeus, describing the world as a living being. Specifically, he believed the universe was created by a divine craftsman, Demiurge, who gave it intelligence by giving it a soul, and that the world soul harmonized the elements and gave the universe reason and order. He wrote, "The world is indeed a living creature, endowed with a soul and intelligence, believing the soul is not just in living things, but is a part of the very structure of reality." Aristotle, however, diverged from Thales and Plato. In De Anima, he defined the soul as the form and function of a living body. He believed only living things had a soul, and directly applied biology to the concept, with inanimate objects left out. In fact, he believed there was sort of a hierarchy of souls, with the vegetative soul for plants, capable of growth and nutrition, the sensitive soul, capable of sensation and movement for animals, and the rational soul for humans, capable of reason and thought. The question of soul is central to our feelings towards what is deserving of empathy, and indeed most humans give varying degrees of empathy towards plants, animals, and humans to this day, with perhaps inanimate objects being a fourth but still empathizable category to some. In addition to a long history of dolls and holy objects invoking anthropomorphic feelings amongst humans, Automata, toys and machines that move on their own, have also existed since at least ancient Greece. These mechanisms with their lifelike autonomy often resemble more of a living thing, and it has been found that humans are more likely to empathize particularly with these moving machines. For example, Archytas in the 4th century BCE invented a mechanical wooden pigeon that could fly, powered by steam or compressed air. Also common were bell strikers and cuckoo clocks, which often at the strike of the hour would set off a mechanical motion and sound, resembling an actual living thing. Leonardo da Vinci famously created a mechanical knight that could wave and move its head and jaw using a system of pulleys and gears. French inventor Jacques de Vaucanson was known to have created very lifelike automata for his time in the 18th century, including a digesting duck that could flap its wings, eat grain, and appear to digest and defecate, as well as a mechanical flute player that could play a real flute using air and mechanical fingers. As the Industrial Revolution began, lifelike automata, which were up to that point handcrafted novelties made to amuse the wealthy, started to become more commonplace and were manufactured in mass. Famous examples included dancing figurines, mechanical monkey musicians, and even talking dolls released by Thomas Edison in the 1890s. Cherished especially by young children, these toys would improve even more as the 20th century rolled on. Seeing these lifelike mechanisms, people started to imagine for the first time a more advanced autonomous invention, robots. Sci-fi movies such as Metropolis and 2001: A Space Odyssey would begin to ask the existential questions of what does it mean to be human, and how could lifelike and intelligent robots and AI blur the traditional lines of empathy towards non-living things. By the end of the 20th century, these sci-fi fantasies would slowly start to become reality, with mechanical as well as digital advancements, and finally would test how humans empathize with these truly more autonomous artificial beings. For example, in the late 1990s, a Japanese company developed a new hybrid between a game and a toy, Tamagotchis, a digital pet that you can interact with and needed to take care of, otherwise it would die. Quickly, Tamagotchis became a sensation, with over 76 million pets sold by 2010. It was found that users developed close connections to their digital pets and felt responsibility to feed them, stressed by an empathetic guilt if they were to die. Researchers became fascinated by this new anthropomorphic phenomenon towards digital pets and dubbed the behavior the Tamagotchi Effect. As it would appear, the new technology's realistic simulation affected people's empathy as would a living thing. As the 21st century began, this Tamagotchi effect would be studied in greater detail as mechanical robots started to take form. For example, in Germany in 2007, researchers had participants interact with a small robot and asked them to switch it off, when the robot begged not to be turned off, saying things like, "You are not going to switch me off, are you?" Many people in the study hesitated or refused to do it, showing signs of human empathy towards robots that can communicate, especially when invoking sympathy or desperation. In 2011, MIT performed a similar study with Hexbug, a small robotic commercial bug toy. In this study, 2 separate groups of participants were asked to kill the Hexbug, but to one of the groups, a charming backstory was given to the mechanical insect. It turned out the group without the knowledge of the personified backstory was more willing to kill the Hexbug than the group that was, showing perhaps that once lifelike attributes and experiences are given to an inanimate object, people might be more likely to empathize with it. Even some of the most scientifically minded people in the world at NASA often have anthropomorphic relationships with their space technology, perhaps most notably with the robotic Mars rovers. The first rover, Sojourner, landed in Mars in 1997, but only lasted for a few months. In 2004, however, 2 new rovers, Spirit and Opportunity, landed on the planet and would last several years, relaying important information back to Earth. The engineers and scientists who worked with the rovers often spoke of them as if they were conscious entities. For example, when Opportunity finally lost communication in 2018, after more than a decade of important discoveries, the engineers held a vigil, and in a final message to the rover, they quoted the Billie Holiday song, "I'll be seeing you. I'll find you in the morning sun. And when the night is new, I'll be looking at the moon, but I'll be seeing you." When Opportunity's replacement, Perseverance, landed on Mars, it took a selfie, and many people responded to it as though the rover were self-aware on Twitter. Indeed, empathy for robots has presented itself in many social media trends. In 2015, the company Boston Dynamics created the robotic dog Spot and showed it being kicked during stability testing, which went viral. Viewers around the world expressed outrage and sadness towards the treatment of the robot, showing people feel passionate about robots being treated humanely. especially on the internet. The same year, a group of Canadian scientists decided to test humans' collective empathy and curiosity towards robots, and create Hitchbot, a robot designed to hitchhike across the world, relying on human kindness to get there. Hitchbot was successfully able to travel through Canada and parts of Europe, but when it reached the US and the hard-nosed city of Philadelphia, it was vandalized, dismembered, and decapitated, sparking widespread public mourning and outrage. Thus, it is fairly clear through all of these examples that even though most people don't care particularly much for the inanimate objects around us, if those objects invoke lifelike emotion or connection, people will likely empathize with them, especially when its well-being is at risk. Indeed, looking into this neurologically, it appears brain regions normally involved with empathy, such as the anterior cingulate cortex, are activated in the same empathetic way for robots as they are for living things. Psychologically, it has been found that the more human-like the robot, or more recently AI is, the more likely we are to empathize with it. With this being said, if the robot is too realistic to a human, that is shown to cause anxiety in people and make the robot less trustworthy. This phenomenon is called the uncanny valley, and the fear is especially prominent if the robot or AI is deemed to have autonomy and lack of supervision from humans. Indeed, over the last couple of years, artificial intelligence has improved dramatically, and interacting with these AI chatbots is starting to become harder to distinguish from actual humans. Interestingly, terms such as assistant, therapist, companion, and friend are more likely to make the user feel comfortable with the AI, as well as if it is more agreeable and empathetic in its discourse. This is especially true if the AI demonstrates it is able to understand your emotions. Indeed, we may wonder whether or not it makes any sense to empathize with inanimate objects or AI technology, but it is clear these entities are effectively empathizing with us. For example, in the early 2000s, Paro was invented, a plush robot pet seal that could be used in a similar capacity as a therapy pet for hospital patients and the elderly, and even for autism as well. In addition, an April 2023 study found ChatGPT's bedside manners were often rated as more empathetic than doctors, and it seems AI is very capable of understanding human emotion when communicated with. A Florida State University study even showed that AI could predict that a human will commit suicide with between 80 to 90% accuracy. Indeed, people can often feel compelled to share sensitive information to AI, perhaps especially for the reason that they aren't a living person, and are unlikely to break a secret. In more rare circumstances, connection towards inanimate objects can become so deep that several people have in fact married one, showing love can cross biological lines. For the vast majority of people, however, drawn to empathize, connect, and appreciate these inanimate technologies, the act seems innocent enough, but some would argue we should not be naive. Contemporary robots and AI are often designed to be deceptively friendly, even though they might be hiding more sinister plans. For example, getting humans to become more empathetic towards robots and AI could cause people to ignore the jobs AI is actively replacing, and could continue to replace in the future. Indeed, the apocalyptic sci-fi scenarios of the 20th century are starting to actually manifest in society today, genuinely worrying many. With these risks in mind, unfortunately we'll have to wait to see what effect these increasingly lifelike technologies will have on society in the future. But with that being said, their presence is already getting us to start asking questions about our capacity for empathy we would likely never have thought of before. What is it that truly makes something worthy of empathy? Is it being created by a higher power or nature, rather than humans? If it is defined by DNA, what is it that makes DNA so different than the code that currently runs these artificial devices? Of course, these ethical questions are difficult to answer precisely, but might suggest how we allocate empathy may be more subjective than we currently think, and possibly should be considered more in the future. Thank you so much for watching. Consider subscribing and check out another video.